Hello and welcome back to the Public Eye Business Podcast brought to you by Granite Exchange. I'm your host, Sarah Travers. You're very welcome back. And throughout this series, I'm speaking with the local entrepreneurs and business owners to learn more about their companies and how they've come to be, to gain insight into their growth and crucially, find out how they continue to innovate. So wherever you get your podcasts from, remember to keep up to date for all new episodes and do subscribe to keep up to date also. Well, today in the studio, I'm thrilled to be joined by Shirley Palmer, CEO and founder of Shirley Palmer International. Shirley, you're very welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, Sarah.
Good. I'm really looking forward to our chat today because we're talking all things mindset. We're talking all things leadership. And Shirley is a multi-award-winning CEO and founder. She's globally recognised as a visionary and a strategist with a remarkable record in the international business arena. Originally from Northern Ireland, in fact, a farmer's daughter from the Glens of Antrim, Shirley started her professional career in the Northern Ireland Civil Service before moving to London at the age of 21 and stepping into the dynamic private equity sector of London, distinguishing herself early on as a leader adept at identifying and leveraging transformative opportunities. Her extensive experience stretches from the financial centres of London to the innovation-driven environments of California, impacting key markets in America, Canada, the UK, Europe and the Middle East. So Shirley has done so much, and we're going to get into that conversation now. Your friends have described you as a bit of a Zebedee, I believe.
Yes, I guess one of those stories of experiencing so many different aspects of life. I'm the one who left the country, a family of 5 children, and between friends and family, there's a few different names that they call me, but that's a nice one. That's a nice one.
And you've recently, well, not recently, but in the last number of years, returned home to Northern Ireland, where you were born, as we were saying there, on a farm?
Yeah. So I'm a farmer's daughter. I'm very lucky we've still got my father. He's 85 years of age. Okay. Sadly, we lost our mum about 15 years ago, quite a young woman in her early 60s. And, being brought up in a farm, I think, teaches you so much more about life. You get to understand resilience in a completely different dynamic. And I think that really was part of my foundation for thinking about business and what that looked like. And returning 5 years ago, or almost 5 years ago, was really a call of my heart and soul saying, time to go home, Shirley. Let's go see what that's like. And to be fair, because of the nature of my work and clients, all I really needed was an airport nearby. So took that leap of faith in a matter of weeks and came back.
And you have travelled the world, as we said in the introduction. You know, it's one thing having the kind of rose-tinted glasses and then the other when the reality strikes that you're back in Northern Ireland now. And how is it?
Wonderful. It's great. It is great to be back. It's great to be closer to family, of course. It's wonderful to have my extended network of friends across the globe actually come and experience, as we call our wee country. It's an interesting experience. I think at the very beginning, there was a few challenges. We have that lovely frame, you're a blowback. When you go away and you come back, you're a blowback.
The opposite of the blow-in. Okay,
yes,
I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah.
And what sort of connotations? Is that a negative word?
It tends, so I try to err on the optimistic side of things in life. And I think a lot of people see it as, well, why have you chosen to come back? What's that about? And how do we view that differently? My own personal point of view is very much where those that are coming back, and we're seeing it more and more since post-COVID, there's more and more people coming back home. I think primarily they're coming back because of a lifestyle choice and change, but also the skills and tools that they've got that they can actually share. And I think it's important to be able to give back to our communities and really support in a different way.
So at the age of 21, you moved to London, but via the civil service. So how did the career path begin for you? So how did you go from farm to the civil service?
Okay, so Lyon Grammar School was my school of choice. Did the 11 passed it and thought, okay, let's see what this is like. If I'm being really honest, didn't particularly like it.
Why not?
For me, education, so for me, that particular aspect of education didn't work. My viewpoint was, this isn't practical. We're regurgitating information. We're encouraging people to pass exams. We're giving them a label. We're giving them a tick in a box. That's not the real life. So what would make a difference? So I left after my O-levels and decided to do a business course. And that business course probably had about 13 different qualifications within that. For me, that was practical. It was about, how do you run a business? What does that look like? Basic accounting, typing at that particular point in time, shorthand as well. All those skills and tools. I went, oh, this is really practical. This makes sense. So that kind of spirited me into the thought process around business, and probably was the start of my dream to run a business. But of course, Northern Ireland in those days was very much driven by government as one of the big employers. So I went to one of the finance departments in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. It was somewhat boring, if I'm being honest.
What was your job?
I was initially started as a data processor. So it was like, you're dealing with births, deaths, marriages, the heavy days of dealing with the deaths and reading the information and inputting it and so on and so forth. Not anything that was particularly exciting or heavy. And I was just like, I've got to be doing something else. Let's see what that looks like and how do I position it. As a young woman, I'd gone through a failed marriage, which was a very difficult one as well, at such a young age. And
How old were you at that time?
I think I got married at 19.
Very young, right.
And really, probably the concept of going to London was an opportunity to get away, an opportunity to start again, and really to try and follow my dreams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what did that anonymity in London provide you? What did you feel when you landed there?
So I didn't just land there. I made sure I'd gone several times and I'd actually got myself a job in advance.
Good.
So it was also, by this stage, I'd connected with a few different people. So I'd created a little bit of a mini community for myself. And it was just huge. It was, vast. You can fit the whole of Northern Ireland into Greater London when you think about it.
Yeah.
And actually, for me, it was an opportunity to flourish. First private equity house I started working for, I was the first non-Scandinavian person to work for them. So that was a big leap of faith, jumping into another culture that I knew nothing about, as well as the sector and the industry. So, working your way through that as a CFO, so a chief financial officer. So I started off as a financial controller, and then you work your way up through that. And really at the end of the day, I guess I ended my career as a financial director. But for me, it was always the diversity of the work that I had the ability to do, and not always looking at numbers. So whether it was investor reporting, whether it was supporting with running projects. So, one of the private equity houses, we needed to refurbish part of our office space. So spending £1 million of somebody else's money in dabbling in architecture design, marrying it into a culture, completely different space. There was lots of fun things.
So how exciting. So your creative side of your brain was really starting to flourish here.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes when I sit and I talk to people from Northern Ireland originally and they move away, there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome that affects them. I'm not hearing that from you at all. I feel that this is where you're starting to really grow as a person.
I think for me, in the early days, I would have never said that I dealt with any form of imposter syndrome. Over my career, there's probably been moments where I have. I don't think anybody ever doesn't feel or doesn't have to deal with it in some aspect. But for me, it was knowledge was of all importance. Meeting people was something that inspired me, wanting to understand what made other people tick. What did success mean to them, how it differs from different people. And, over the years, I look at it very differently now. And I'd say, what that's helped me do and understand is when I'm communicating with other people, whether you are a bus driver or a train driver, or whether you're a multimillionaire or a billionaire, I'm looking at the human being that's in front of me first, not about who, what they've achieved or what difference is their success level to the other or how much money have they got in their account. Now, of course, being wealthy gives you the opportunity to drive change and make a difference. But actually, even someone as a bus driver or a train driver can be smiling at everybody that comes on their bus for the day and make people's lives a little bit more engaging and happier, or creating smiles. We see that with some people that, suddenly end up with an MBE or of that ilk because they bring some added light to other people's lives.
It's not what they say, it's how they say it. It's not what they do, it's how they do it. And you don't need to have a special label to be able to do that. You can create that feeling and that empathy and that warmth no matter what level you're at. Mm-hmm. So, okay, you were identifying something that was, what makes people tick, which we now know and call, emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. This is something that you were maybe one of those leaders back in the day. What happened then after London?
So 2 private equity houses, later, a very successful career. It was a magical trip to Africa that flipped things over for me. So one of my sisters and her husband, they have 3 children, and they were looking at one of those once-in-a-lifetime trips. And given that I'd traveled extensively, they said, can you give us some ideas and suggestions? So what ended up happening was I was invited to go along and join them and be their guide and support them in the journey. And, we did the Maasai, dealing with the tribes people. We did a little bit in Zanzibar, and we were also in Cape Town and got to experience Table Mountain, and also went to Robben Island. And some of those experiences were challenging because you're thinking about the diversity and adversity that some of these people had dealt with. But for me, it was inspiring the children to really understand the depths of other cultures and what that looks like. So, being with the Maasai and the tribes people, or being down in the shanty towns and seeing how people were living elsewhere in the world, took them out of Northern Ireland into a different space and place. When I came back from that trip, I suddenly realized that actually I wasn't paying attention to my own physical body and the ailments that I was struggling with, elements of migraines or digestive issues. And it was like, time I actually pay attention here to what else my body is telling me. And in all fairness, it was really recognizing the industry is a very challenging industry. I was a woman in a man's world. And the likelihood of me being made a partner, albeit in my opinion I should have been, was pretty slim. So it was time to take that leap of faith and jump. Was I ready? Was I organized? With hindsight, I think we always say we should have done it earlier.
But it's the fear around it and the
absolutely,
unknown.
Absolutely. And, what I encourage entrepreneurs or those that I support today when they're looking at doing something else and creating it, try and ensure that you've got something else as that main income, even if that means you're going on a part-time basis, that you've got that added support along the way. So really, that was the start of what is now shirleypalmer.com. Fast forward today, it's very different, but the journey took me to writing a book on emotional intelligence, moving to California for a couple of years, literally upping six and going, right, okay, I guess I just need to go do this. And really getting a much better understanding of the US. What is America? What does that look like? I think most people make the assumption it's one country, but it's one landmass with, shall we say, 50 different countries within that. So it does make it very different. But I think when you have a worldly viewpoint of things, you can look at things with several different pairs of eyes rather than just one, and not be so blinkered.
So what age did you go to the States?
Oh, gosh. Now, so you get into ages and numbers, and I don't remember what
yeah.
that was. Late 40s.
Late 40s. Wow.
Yeah.
So did you think, I'm going to give this a go and see how it goes? Or had you planned to make that your home for a long period of time?
So the part of the reason for going was my publishers were on the East Coast, and we were going to do a rather large book tour throughout the States. So rather than traveling back and forth, it just didn't make sense to be doing that. It was going to be too disruptive. And I thought, well, actually, why not? And if I was going to go and live anywhere, why not live in California, the Sunshine State?
Was it lovely?
Beautiful, beautiful experience. I was living in Palm Springs, which actually is in the middle of the desert. You're surrounded by mountains, so very different. But within a couple of hours, there were so many different things that you could be doing. So it made perfect sense from that viewpoint. So the leap of faith was really to say, if I'm going to do this, let's go do this way. Let's see what that experience brings to the table. I never necessarily looked at it from a viewpoint that I would stay there forever or ultimately make it my home. I think it was, let's go see what this looks like. Let's see what this feels like. And we'll take it from there.
And that was your first book, the
Yes.
Emotional Intelligence book.
Yeah.
How well received was it?
It's a powerful little book. You could read it in a matter of a few hours. I think most people got to grips with it relatively quickly because it is very much a practical book.
What's it called?
It's called 12 Words. So it goes through a series of 12 different words, and within each chapter, what it's doing is it's talking to you about, if we look at courage as an example, there's a think it, there's a feel it, there's a do it section. So it's a practical book. So it's really helping people to understand some of the challenges that we go through in life, from dealing with change, finding the courage, trusting ourselves, the whole way through to love and gratitude, and recognizing the importance of what does that mean for each of us in its space and place.
And what was it like, the whole book writing process?
Book writing process was really simple, I think, from my viewpoint. I actually wrote the book without thinking that I wanted a publisher initially, and then it was one of those things that just suddenly manifested out of somewhere. I didn't want to be influenced too much by what another publisher would be viewing it as. Having said that, I'm about to write another book, and with that, my view is going down definitely the publishing route. I'm looking for a little bit of their added guidance with this one because I think it's such an important issue, and really looking at stress in the workplace and how we can support that in a completely different way.
Now, it says here in the briefing document that you ran a radio show to 500,000 US businesswomen.
Yes.
So you must have made a good connection there. How did that come about?
It was a really interesting one. Again, I have this knack of kind of pulling things out of the ether.
Yeah.
I sit down, I think about it. I was like, making a radio show might be quite fun. And then all of a sudden, somebody presents me with something. So the lady who ran the overall platform, they run what they call as chapters in the US. And she decided that really one of the things that would be really great would be to have different experts in the field to support and bring some added new knowledge and information to the wider community. So again, I was the only British person on the platform. And really it was down to me to decide how I wanted to run the show. So in those days, we didn't have as much of all the technical stuff we've got today. And you get to suddenly realize how things shift and change in the space of a year, never mind 10 years. But I preferred to run everything live. Most people re-recorded theirs, and I like the energy of creating something live.
The immediacy of it and everything,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah. And just bringing a slightly different aspect to it, and really thinking about different aspects in the world of personal and business development and how that would make a little bit of difference. So it was fun. It was engaging,
and you quite a following.
It was a different experience for sure.
And what kind of guests did you have on, or what was the format?
The format was, again, trying to keep it relatively brief, a little bit of their experience, what they felt was really important, what else could we do about change in the world, what might that look like, and the diversity was anything from Hay House publishers to people in the music industry, for example.
So women, that's been a big focus for you. You talked about your own experiences, feeling like you might never be made partner for whatever reasons, but that's something that you really like giving back, don't you? You've done an awful lot of work too since you've come back to Northern Ireland and in rural areas as well. Tell us about that.
So one of the things when I came back, and we dealt with the COVID issues and the wider aspects with the pandemic. Some of my clients were in a position that they really needed to just press pause. Shirley, what do we do? How do we address this on a global basis? And my answer to that was really straightforward and simple. Put me on pause. Make sure you look after your staff. People need food on the table and they need a roof over their head. Whilst I think the world were trying to say, this could just be a few weeks, my gut instinct was this is going to be more than a few weeks. It could be a month, it could be months, or it could be a year. So that gave me a little bit of breathing space. In that breathing space, I built a new business, a new brand called The Simple Series. And our focus was really creating a fast-track business program to help anybody in business. With the support of Ulster Bank and in conjunction with Ledcom in Lawn, I built a program, added another section onto the existing program that we created, and we ran a local throughout the whole of Northern Ireland. I think that was one of the stipulations. I said I didn't want just a particular county. I wanted people from the whole, across the whole province. So we ran a rural women's program. We had women who were farmers' wives, people that had never spoke before, people that didn't even own a laptop, people that had some ideas, really challenged about, could little old me maybe actually do this? So we encapsulated an extra month on the program in order to help and support them with mindset, because I realized quite quickly that a lot of women were struggling with self-worth, confidence. Was it even possible? And what might that look like? So fun campaign, fun project, difficult because we were doing this in the middle of the pandemic as well. So we were able to run some of it in live and some of it remotely. We had a lot of coverage, a lot of support. It's something I would have liked to have seen that we could have ran again. But with all these things, it's always about the funding and the challenges that go with it.
So talk to me about the business now. What is it you actually do and who are your clients?
So Simple Series we've now parked. In the interim period, we may switch that into an online library for entrepreneurs looking for added information and knowledge that they're seeking out. And right now, my focus under shirleypalmer.com is all around leadership. So primarily conscious leadership. And a lot of people get confused with, well, what does that mean? How does that present? And really, if we think about it, firstly and foremost, around self-leadership and what does self-leadership mean? So the ownership and responsibility around our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. So looking at it from that stance of the mindset mastery, the emotional intelligence, and being that example in the world and recognizing that You can't be one person and work and be another person with your friends and family and then be another person in your private. You've got to really recognize the empowerment in bringing yourself together as one whole person, and therefore sharing that in a very authentic, open, integral way to help people understand who you really are.
That's really interesting. And does that go back to values, your values?
Yes.
Right. So I'm thinking earlier in your career, it's quite difficult to really understand. You know what you feel is right and what you feel is wrong. But there is a sense that you have to go to work and pretend to be another person for a little while because it's all new and you're out of your comfort zone. So does that sort of amalgamation of all the different parts of you, does that tend to happen later in life, or do you see that in younger people too?
I think what I would say today is traditionally, it's maybe as we get older, we get to understand ourselves a little bit better, and we understand what we like, what we don't like.
You've had a few knocks along the way, you know.
They tend to say when you hit 50, you can press a reset button and you're starting a whole new career again because you're choosing something from your own perspective, not something that your peers or your parents or someone else would have suggested that you've done. What I think about the next generation, if I look at my godson and my goddaughter, they're both 22, and they're probably two of the most emotionally intelligent people I know. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not struggling with making some of those tough decisions and looking at the direction of where their career is taking them. And what's lovely is that they both come to me and look to me for added advice and guidance on, well, I'm thinking of doing this as a master's. What do you think? Being able to say clearly, actually, doing a master's. So my godson was looking at doing a master's in real estate. And I said, you don't need to do a master's in real estate. It's not going to bring anything else to the table. It'd be better get into business and roll up your sleeves. Or if you're wanting to look at something else, then see what that is. So he's now switched it into corporate finance, which will give him a better grounding to look at business and how that's in a different way. So I think our next generation definitely needs more support. They need guidance. Are they open to it? Yes. But it's got to be approached in a completely different way. It's not about the schoolmaster and the big stick. It's got to be bringing that emotional intelligence to the table as well. So the kindness, the compassion, active listening. Most people will respond before a person has finished speaking. And that's not active listening. That's simply wanting to get their tuppence in before something else or what have you. When you allow yourself to be in the here and now and present with what's actually being said, you're more likely to be able to come back with a favorable response. And or the person may have already talked themselves into what it is that they needed to be looking at themselves.
So is it coaching that you offer? Because I know coaching does reflect a person back on themselves in a way, but I'm hearing there's a little bit of advice in there. A pure coach isn't supposed to give answers. They're supposed to allow the person to find the answers.
Yeah, I think there's a big challenge for anybody out there that calls himself a coach, because the coaching industry is so difficult, and there is a lot, unfortunately, of bad news stories around coaching. So I tend not to refer to myself as a coach, but there is elements in what I do around coaching. There's elements around mentoring. There's elements around giving that advice and that guidance. And it can be an eclectic mix of different things. Talking about local and, having listened back to one of your previous podcasts, a lovely example is family businesses, for example. So we're a small country of family businesses, in all fairness. And even if we look at beyond the agricultural sector as to what that is and what that looks like. So, that was a perfect example of a project where I was brought in to help them really look at what was their legacy, what was their succession plan, help them build the foundation that they really needed, having lost a generation of their leaders. and recognizing what was different. I probably take a very different approach to most business consultants, coaches, mentors that you look at. And for me, it is about being very personal and looking at each of those individuals and having conversations with each of those individuals to get to the core of what do you really want to do and what do you see in this? And actually, have you all thought about, does your children want to take on this business? And then suddenly it's like, oh, haven't really thought about that question and the challenges that get presented in that. So it's personal development, it's business development. They are melded into one. People might come to me about business and then they realize there's certain aspects that they need to address in their life as well. So fundamentally, it's really about the leadership with whilst I still support businesses or individuals in a one-to-one, our primary goal is really supporting other businesses with our leadership program. And that's either a 3-day intensive or a 6-week program.
Gosh, right. So on the 3-day intensive program, if somebody's listening to this now and they think, oh, tell me more, what does that look like?
There's not much disparity between the 3 days and the 6 weeks. It's really just about timing. Not everybody can manage the intensity of doing a 3-day program. We're covering everything from the ethos and the history of leadership, how that's presented. We're helping them understand more about conscious leadership. Again, we're touching on emotional intelligence. We're helping them understand how do they manage their teams better. We're helping them understand how do I build that into a more worldly case. So recognizing where is their business going, what are they doing, how can they improve upon that, and why does it look different? And again, what generally happens in here is people get to see relatively quickly, oh, I've been doing this all wrong. Oh, I need to change my stance. Oh. And the recognition.
Do you see the results? Can you talk a little bit about, obviously there's client confidentiality and all of that, but I'm just wondering what those light bulb moments are for people.
The results are relatively tangible, literally within the first session, because you get to see the light bulb moments for those individuals. And what typically happens is people will always come up and ask you some side questions and, what they're dealing with. So, maybe someone is dealing with wanting to get promotion and they just don't get promoted and trying to understand how they can manage that differently, or conflict resolution presenting itself as a challenge and not being able to figure out, how do I manage this in the best possible way? Or a manager who suddenly realizes, oh my goodness, I'm not working with my team. I'm seeing it very much as them and us and working against it. So,
is that not what happens in leadership?
So I would agree in a sense it does, but being a good leader is about setting the example. It's about stepping up and knowing that your team can do the job without having to question them and not micromanaging. So helping them to understand micromanaging doesn't actually support anybody. What's a great leader is helping them understand where their strengths are, not focusing on their weaknesses.
Well, that's become a big thing at the minute too. And I know whenever I'm doing a bit of work, because I would do a few training courses with different companies, and I always shudder a little bit when I see the CEO come on the training with the rest of the team. And you have that moment of, oh gosh, are the team going to be able to be free to say what they want to say? And then when you take sometimes a boss out of the situation, it's a very different dynamic. Which option is right for you? Do you encourage both?
I would say that the CEO should not be involved in the training with them. I would say that it doesn't mean that individual man or woman doesn't understand what's being covered in there. It doesn't mean that they can't have a better understanding of what all of that is, or participate in a CEO only leadership program, shall we say. Because I think the importance is we want to give them that freedom to speak. We want to
the psychological safety as well, I suppose. That
help them understand that anything that's said in the room is said in the room and kept in the room, and for them to be able to see how they can deal with those things differently and what that looks like.
But you do see transformation, and you do see those leaders going, I need to change. And change is difficult, but when it happens, it's so good for business.
Oh, absolutely. We had one individual who was pretty challenged in her career and really looking at what she wanted to do and recognizing this is not really where I want to be right now, and I want to look at doing something else. So with a little bit of added mentoring from myself, she ended up taking a double leap of faith, shall we say. So instead of going up to like a role that would be higher, she did a double leap.
Wow.
And actually went for a job interview that she would never have tried before, got the position, was really initially excited about it, and really viewing, okay, I've taken the next leap of faith. I've understood what that looks like, and being able to see it. We've had others who within that particular program, again, a local one, who have identified, actually, I want to be doing more within my business. So I want to step up. I want to be in director level. I want to help manage the change. I want to see where else our business can go on the world stage, and I want to participate in that. And that's fantastic, because many people tend to look at Northern Ireland and think that people just don't want to speak out. They don't want to talk about their successes. There's a big challenge around that for businesses to share their success, and what that looks like.
Yes, we tend to be quite modest, and then that, as you say, the culture of not speaking out and not getting ideas above your station. But that's all part of it now, isn't it? Communication is key, and so often the stumbling blocks and the blockers to success, whether it's at organisational level or indeed for an individual, is because they don't want to have the conversation. Do you find that again and again?
Yes, I preach, I'm going to use that word again, preach to people to simply say, do you know what, keep an open door policy. If it means that you have a half day every week, Thursday afternoon, you have an open day policy so that people can just come in and talk to you and sit down and talk about some of those other things that are going on. Recognizing that having Chatham House rules to protect what those conversations are and what they're talking about, to really support them in a different dynamic. If you have members of your staff that can't come talk to you about what's going on, it's a very difficult one. We've got to encourage more and more of that.
Yeah, that openness, and it's difficult, and change takes courage, I suppose, as well, and doing things differently. And then the trust has to be there too. If there's anybody listening to this now that would like to find out more about you, what should they do?
Connect with me through shirleypalmer.com. There's a portal on there to drop a message. More than happy to have a conversation. We try to share as much knowledge through LinkedIn as possible, again, guiding people to look at, how can they be better leaders? What does that look like? And understand those deeper messages underneath it.
What makes you tick?
Oh, inspiring others, seeing success, creating. I guess creating is probably another one. So right now, with our leadership program and seeing the success with that, what we have also been recognizing is the number of people that are dealing with stress. So I think post-COVID, no one's really been recognizing the stress levels that people are at, and most people are probably running at 80-85%. That's not feasible in the long term. We're going to end up with more people getting sick, whether that's diabetes, whether that's heart attack, whether that's stress, anxiety, and lending into something else. So it was a no-brainer for me to decide to add another section to our leadership program and now create what we've called the Well-Led program. So bringing in the leadership and the wellness together, because I think more and more businesses are not necessarily focusing on the well-being of their staff and how that can be brought about in a different way. And for me, helping others with, what is your legacy? What are you doing in the local community? What does that look like? And how can you do something differently to support? So I'm in the midst, rather crazily, I'm in the midst of building a new business, which is going to be a product. And in simple terms, imagine having the ability to plug into a piece of kit. Let's imagine you're just sitting on a little cushion, shall we say, and you can plug into that every day for 30 minutes, and that's going to lower your stress levels, make a difference to your nervous system, help you sleep better, better cognitive behavior, so thinking better with your brain, etc. So it's two pieces of technology. No one's brought them together right now. I'm in the midst of doing that and hoping that we can get that out there within the next 12 to 18 months.
Sounds very exciting. I remember years ago covering a story for the BBC, and it was in schools and in quite a troubled area of Belfast, and it was this heart math that they had to calm the little kiddies down. So it was about teaching breathing, but they used technology to get people to breathe, and then the deeper you breathed and counted, the higher the balloon would go on the screen, little hot air balloons. So it was lovely, just that importance of learning to breathe and look after yourself. And we are busier than ever, and that's why we're not having the conversations. We are inundated and scared to switch the phones off as well, so it's 24/7, or we allow it to be 24/7. What's your best bit of advice to people now if they want to look after themselves, take a step forward in looking after their staff as well? What do they need to do? You said some people aren't even aware, aren't doing it well. What should they do?
So I think the first thing is about being in the here and now. Whilst I talk about future and whilst I talk about legacy, you can't build a business if you're not actually looking at what's actually happening in your business here and now. And that therefore means help supporting your staff. I think for those businesses that have maybe got that bigger space and availability to create those wellness areas for the team so that people can go and literally use different tools and methodologies to support them. I think also as human beings, we forget the fact we are human beings. We're not a digital product. The phone has suddenly become an extension of everybody, and really important to learn how to switch off from that. People often say, "Oh, but you sent me that email at 11 o'clock at night," and I'm like, "But you chose to read it at 11 o'clock at night." So anybody can send an email at any time.
I like the new scheduling tool now. It reminds you, just because you're sending this 11 o'clock at night, we're not even thinking about the person. We don't really expect them to pick it up then, but it's just suited to send it at that time. But again, it's all the imagined conversations.
So find time to disconnect.
Yeah.
Get out in nature. I'm not saying don't take your phone, because we know the world is a challenged place today, and there are times when we do need to have that just in case anything would happen. But disconnect, switch it off.
Do you find you take your own advice?
I do. Daily walks every day.
Yeah.
My phone has a do not disturb button on it. So unless you are a member of my inner circle and in my favorites, or an urgent client project, then that means that nobody's going to disturb me between the hours of X and Y. And I think that's an important aspect to do. I don't think enough people, my dad would say you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. I think we forget we're not meant to be spending our time in boxes. We should be spending more time outside, connecting with nature, being able to be in the here and the now.
What do you think's been your biggest challenge in business?
This is an interesting one that someone said to me this week. And I was having a conversation with a wonderful woman in Intertrade Ireland about how we do more to support businesses and look at funding. And she said, your barrier is your expertise. And I thought, that will come up somewhere that makes relevant sense.
I'm trying to think that through. What does that mean?
So,
you know too much, or what?
In a sense, I know all the different things that's there, but what's happened is nobody's actually joining the dots together. So I've had I have a life full of worldly experience, and in lots of different ways, I simplify everything and look at it from a viewpoint of how can we make a difference, and how can we make a difference? And if it's only making a difference in one individual's life in that day or whatever, then you're doing something good. And I think the challenge in some instances for me have been looking at some of those gray areas where there's been aspects of failure, that things that didn't work, failed marriage, a marketing campaign that didn't work. We could look at the Simple series more recently and say, maybe we could consider some aspects of that didn't work. I tend to still err on the positive side and said, failure is not something to frown away from. It's something to learn from. It's a stepping stone. It's a great opportunity to learn something new and understand what else we can do. I think today's become very complex in how we look at things. And I think a lot of people look at AI, for example, as a whole other topic. We could be here for another day. They look at the complexity of that. And I think if we can go back to the simplicity and think a little bit more as human beings, what did our grandparents do? What did our parents do? What did our grandparents do? We supported each other through communities. We had those deep and meaningful conversations. We got together and supported each other. And again, it was about the conversation. It was about being there. It was about supporting. The farmers would get together over the course of a week, and everybody would chip in to help everybody else that lived in that particular road. And I think we need to take some of those aspects back again and understand the importance of doing that rather than getting too driven by the digital era. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I think there's a lot that we can use from it and we can support, but we've still got to remember the importance of the human experience.
Well, it sounds like there's so much still to come, and I can't wait to see what the next chapter will be. But, you're making such a difference, whether it is about that conscious leadership, about helping people have that realization or that penny dropping moment where they think differently. The purpose, though, of this podcast is to inspire existing business owners and ambitious entrepreneurs to grow their business by offering an insight into the success of businesses such as yours. So, Shirley, what advice, though, would you give to people who may have a business idea but have no idea where to begin or are unsure as to whether the risk is worth taking?
Okay, so I'm always going to argue and say the risk is always worth taking, because if you don't take the risk, the answer is always no. So first and foremost, go do it. It's as simple as go do it, go try it. Bounce those ideas off someone else. Look at it from a viewpoint of creating an MVP, so a minimal viable product. You can do that relatively quickly and easily. These days, with the support of AI, there is a great deal of amazing accelerators around the whole of the province. And again, depending on what your niche is, there's different accelerators for different niches and different sectors. So again, go have a conversation with one of them. Find someone that you are inspired by, reach out to them, have a conversation with them. Again, if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no.
Shirley Palmer, it's been fascinating to talk to you today. We have spoken for quite some time now, and there's still more that I want to ask, but we have to draw it to a close. Thank you so much for being here today.
My absolute
and thanks
pleasure.
to everyone for tuning in. Do join me again very soon for another great episode of the Public Eye Podcast. This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service, where our team using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.